My name is April, 27 years old, daughter of parents whose marriage crumbled when I was 15. My mother raised me alone after my dad left us for his affair partner Stephanie. Despite minimal contact over 12 years, Dad suddenly demanded I attend his wedding to the woman who destroyed our family. What he didn't know was that I discovered the shocking truth about their affair just days before the ceremony. I never planned on causing a scene at his wedding, but when he pushed me to participate in his charade of happiness, something inside me snapped. Before I continue my story, let me know where you're watching from. In the comments, hit that like button and subscribe to hear how I exposed the truth at my father's wedding. Growing up, I believed we were the perfect family. My mother, Jennifer, worked as a pediatric nurse at the local hospital. She had this incredible ability to make everyone feel cared for, starting with her patients and ending with my father and me. Despite working long shifts, she never missed my school events. She would rush home, change out of her scrubs, and arrive just as my performances began, always sitting in the front row with the proudest smile. My father, Richard, was a regional manager for a pharmaceutical company. His work required frequent travel, but when he was home, he commanded attention. He had a charismatic presence, always telling animated stories about his business trips, bringing me souvenirs from different cities. I remember proudly telling my elementary school friends that my dad was an important businessman who traveled the world. On weekends, when Dad was home, we would have family days. Mom would pack elaborate picnics, and we would head to the local park. Dad would push me on the swings, teaching me to pump my legs to go higher. "You can touch the sky, April," he would say as I squealed with delight. Those moments made me feel like I could achieve anything with them supporting me. As I entered middle school, I began noticing subtle changes in our family dynamic. Dad's business trips grew more frequent and longer. The souvenirs became less thoughtful, sometimes just generic hotel pens or notepads. When he was home, he spent more time on his phone, stepping outside to take calls during dinner. I remember Mom's eyes following him as he walked out onto our back porch, her smile fading slightly before returning when she noticed me watching. "Your father works very hard for us," she would say, cutting my meat even though I was old enough to do it myself. It felt like she was trying to convince herself as much as me. By the time I turned 13, the changes became more pronounced. Mom and Dad's conversations grew shorter, often just exchanging necessary information about schedules and bills. The easy laughter that once filled our home became rare. I tried to bridge the growing gap between them by suggesting family movie nights or weekend trips. But Dad always had work commitments, and Mom looked too tired to insist. I started spending more time with Mom, helping her cook dinner or folding laundry while we watched her favorite medical dramas. We developed inside jokes and our own little traditions, like Sunday morning pancakes shaped like whatever animal I requested. With Dad, my relationship became increasingly distant. He would bring expensive gifts after longer absences, as though compensating for his lack of presence with material things. When I was 14, I overheard my first parental argument. It was past midnight, and I had gotten up for water when I heard Mom's voice strained with emotion coming from their bedroom. "The credit card statement shows dinner for 2 at La Maison last Tuesday, Richard. You told me you were at a conference in Chicago that entire week." Dad's response was too quiet for me to hear clearly, but Mom's reply wasn't. "Do you think I'm stupid? This is the 3rd time this month there are charges that don't align with your supposed travel schedule." I tiptoed back to my room, my stomach knotting with anxiety. The next morning, both acted as though nothing had happened, but the tension was palpable. My 15th birthday was the last time we felt like a family. Dad had returned from a business trip the night before and seemed determined to make the day special. He took the day off work, something increasingly rare, and surprised me with breakfast in bed, chocolate chip pancakes that he had clearly struggled to make, judging by the disaster in the kitchen that Mom was quietly cleaning up. That evening, we went to my favorite restaurant, an upscale Italian place downtown. Dad ordered sparkling cider so I could join their toast to our beautiful daughter. For those few hours, it felt like old times. Mom laughed genuinely at Dad's jokes, and Dad looked at Mom with what I thought was love. I was naive enough to believe things were getting better. 1 week later, everything fell apart. It was a Saturday afternoon in April. Mom had been called into the hospital for an emergency, and I was home alone working on a biology project. Dad wasn't supposed to be home until the following day, but I heard his car pull into the driveway around 4. Excited to show him my project, I ran downstairs just as he was setting his phone on the kitchen counter. His phone buzzed repeatedly with incoming texts. When I glanced at the screen, I saw the name Steph and preview messages that made my blood run cold. Last night was amazing, and can't wait to tell everyone about us. When Dad came out of the bathroom and saw me staring at his phone, his face went through a series of emotions: surprise, anger, guilt, and finally, a resigned sort of calm that frightened me more than anything. "April, I need to talk to you about something," he said, his voice unnaturally even. Before he could continue, I heard Mom's car in the driveway. She had forgotten some medication charts and had come home to retrieve them. The look Dad gave me was pleading, but when Mom walked in, I couldn't hold back. "Mom, Dad is cheating on you!" I blurted out, tears already streaming down my face. "Someone named Steph texted him about telling everyone about them." The color drained from Mom's face as she turned to Dad. "Richard." What followed was the most painful conversation of my young life. Dad admitted to having an affair with Stephanie, a pharmaceutical rep at his company. He claimed it had been going on for only a few months and that he was confused about his feelings. "I never meant for this to happen," he said, a phrase I would come to despise for its utter lack of accountability. Mom maintained a composure that still amazes me to this day. She asked me to go to my room, but I refused. "This concerns me too," I insisted, my voice shaking, but determined. The three of us sat at our kitchen table where we had shared thousands of meals together as Dad dismantled our family. He wanted a separation to figure things out. Mom simply asked if he was in love with Stephanie. His hesitation before answering, "I think I am," was the final crack in our family foundation. 2 days later, Dad packed suitcases while Mom was at work. He tried to explain to me that he would always be my father, and that this had nothing to do with me. I remember staring at him, unable to reconcile this man with the father who once told me I could touch the sky. "When will you be back?" I asked, still not fully understanding that this wasn't temporary. "I'm not coming back to live here, April," he said, avoiding my eyes. "But we'll see each other all the time. I promise." Another promise he would break. The divorce proceedings revealed Dad's true colors. He hired an aggressive attorney who fought to minimize his financial obligations. Mom, who had always handled our family's finances conservatively, was blindsided by the discovery of hidden accounts and manipulated assets. During this time, Dad moved in with Stephanie, who lived in a luxury apartment downtown that, as we later discovered, he had been paying for even while still living with us. His visits with me became sporadic and awkward. He would take me to expensive restaurants where we would sit in uncomfortable silence, interrupted only by his attempts at small talk and frequent checks of his phone. Mom never spoke ill of Dad in front of me, but I saw her crying when she thought I was asleep. I watched her work extra shifts to maintain our home, coming back exhausted, but still finding energy to ask about my day and help with homework. Meanwhile, Dad fought the court-ordered child support, claiming financial hardships despite maintaining his lavish lifestyle with Stephanie. By my 16th birthday, Dad had missed 3 scheduled visits in a row. When he finally called, it was to tell me he and Stephanie were going to Hawaii for 2 weeks. "I'll bring you back something nice," he promised. "I don't want something nice," I said. "I wanted you to come to my debate competition like you promised." "There will be other debates, sweetheart. And other daughters," I replied before hanging up. In the aftermath of the divorce, I developed severe trust issues. I withdrew from friends suspicious of their motives and waiting for betrayal. My grades dropped, and I started having anxiety attacks. Mom, despite her own grief, found me a therapist, Sarah, who helped me process my anger and abandonment. Sarah helped me understand that Dad's choices weren't my fault and that his inability to be present didn't reflect my worth. Still, the damage was done. I spent my high school years building walls around my heart, determined never to be blindsided by betrayal again. College became my escape and opportunity for reinvention. I received a partial scholarship to a state university 3 hours from home. Mom helped me move into my dorm, arranging my bedding and stocking my mini fridge with homemade meals, tears in her eyes as she prepared to leave. "I'm so proud of you, April," she said, hugging me tightly. "This is the beginning of your life on your own terms." I didn't tell her how terrified I was of being away from her, my one constant source of support. I had invited Dad to help with move-in day, but he had a business emergency and sent a check instead. The pattern continued. The financial reality of college hit hard. My scholarship covered tuition, but not room and board. Mom contributed what she could from her nursing salary, but I needed to work part-time to cover the rest. I found a job at the campus bookstore, working 20 hours a week between classes. The court had ordered Dad to pay a portion of my college expenses, but his contributions were inconsistent at best. There were months when I had to call him repeatedly before he would transfer money for my meal plan. Each call was humiliating, with Dad often questioning my expenses or suggesting I should have chosen a more affordable school. "Your mother filled your head with unrealistic expectations," he would say. "Do you know how many other expenses I have?" I wanted to scream that his other expenses included luxury vacations with Stephanie and the down payment on their new house in the suburbs, but I swallowed my pride because I needed the money. Despite these challenges, college became a place of growth and new connections. I met Emily and Jasmine in my freshman English class, and we quickly became inseparable. They had stable, loving families and were initially shocked by my family story, but they never judged. Instead, they included me in their family events with Jasmine's parents, even sending me care packages during finals week. Through them, I learned what healthy relationships looked like. I watched how Jasmine's parents supported each other, how Emily's mother and stepfather navigated co-parenting with her biological father without drama. They became my model for what I wanted in my future. In my sophomore year, I met Tyler in my psychology class. He was kind, consistent, and transparent, qualities I had learned to value. We started dating, and for the first time, I began to lower my defenses. However, my trust issues surfaced whenever Tyler was late or didn't respond to texts immediately. I would spiral into anxiety, convinced he was lying or seeing someone else. "Not everyone is your father, April," he said during one of our arguments, a statement that hit me like a physical blow because of its truth. Our relationship lasted a year before we mutually decided to end it. Tyler needed someone who could trust more freely, and I needed more time to heal. We parted as friends, another new experience for me, who had always viewed endings as abandonment. Academically, I thrived despite my heavy work schedule. I majored in communications with a minor in psychology, fascinated by how people connect and disconnect from each other. My professors praised my insightful analysis in assignments, unaware that my understanding came from painful personal experience. My junior year brought an unexpected health scare for Mom. Years of stress and overwork had resulted in severe migraines and elevated blood pressure. The doctor warned her about the risk of stroke if she didn't reduce her stress levels. I wanted to drop out and come home, but she refused. "Your education is non-negotiable," she insisted. "I've adjusted my schedule and I'm taking better care of myself now." Dad's response when I called to inform him was predictably self-centered. "What does this have to do with me?" he asked. "Your mother made her choices." "Her choices?" I exploded. "Like the choice to raise me alone while you started a new life. The choice to work double shifts because you fought every increase in child support." He hung up. 3 days later, a large flower arrangement arrived at Mom's house with a generic "Get well soon" card. The gesture felt empty, too little and far too late. Senior year brought the excitement of graduation and the anxiety of entering the workforce. When the day finally arrived, Mom sat in the audience, cheering loudly as I crossed the stage. Emily and Jasmine's families were there too, having adopted me into their circles. Dad had promised to attend, but texted the night before that he and Stephanie had a conflict with a charity gala they were hosting. I told myself I didn't care that his absence was so expected, it couldn't hurt anymore. But as I scanned the audience before the ceremony, I still found myself looking for him, a reflex I couldn't seem to break. After graduation, I landed an entry-level position at a marketing firm in a city about an hour from my hometown. The salary wasn't impressive, but it allowed me to rent a small apartment and start building my independence. Mom helped me furnish it with secondhand finds that we refinished together, creating a cozy space that felt like mine. Dad sent a housewarming gift, an expensive coffee maker, that sat unused on my counter for months because it reminded me of his pattern attempting to buy affection rather than earning it through consistent presence. Contact with Dad dwindled to holiday texts and occasional birthday calls. From mutual family members, I learned that he and Stephanie were still together, having built a life that didn't seem to have much room for me in it. I focused instead on building my career, nurturing my friendships, and continuing therapy to work through my lingering trust and abandonment issues. By 26, I had been promoted twice, had a small but solid group of friends, and had developed a comfortable routine of weekly dinners with Mom. I wasn't dating seriously, still cautious about intimate relationships, but I was content with my progress. The painful edges of my past had begun to soften, and I felt I was finally moving forward rather than being defined by what had happened when I was 15. Then came the wedding invitation. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday, thick cream paper with gold calligraphy. I recognized Dad's address on the return label and felt a familiar knot form in my stomach. Inside was a formal invitation to the wedding of Richard James Collins and Stephanie Marie Bennett, scheduled for 3 months later at the Grand Plaza Hotel. For several minutes, I just stared at it. Dad and Stephanie had been together for 12 years, their relationship outlasting my parents' marriage by 2 years. Why get married now? And more puzzlingly, why invite me? My phone rang that evening, Dad's name flashing on the screen. It was our first call in months. "Did you receive the invitation?" he asked, skipping any greeting. "Yes." "And?" His tone held an expectation that I found irritating. "And what, you want me to RSVP 12 years after you left Mom for this woman?" He sighed, a sound I knew well, his signal that I was being difficult. "April, it's been 12 years. I would think you'd have moved past this teenage angst by now." "Teenage angst," I repeated, incredulous. "Is that what you call the complete upheaval of my life?" "That's exactly what I mean," he said. "This dramatic framing of events. People get divorced, April. It happens every day. Most children don't hold a grudge for over a decade." His dismissal of my feelings ignited a familiar anger. "Maybe most children's fathers don't abandon them and their mothers financially and emotionally." "I never abandoned you," he protested. "I paid child support, I called, I sent gifts." "When it was convenient," I countered. "Do you know how many important events in my life you missed? Do you even know where I work or what my job title is?" There was a pause. This is precisely why we need to reconnect. The wedding is an opportunity for us to repair our relationship. Stephanie and I both want you there. The mention of her name still made my skin crawl. "I'm sure she does. She's been asking me to reach out to you for years. She feels terrible about how things happened." "If she felt so terrible, she could have ended the affair before it destroyed our family." Dad's voice hardened. "April, enough. What happened between your mother and me was complicated and had nothing to do with you. I'm calling to tell you that as my only daughter, I expect you at my wedding. It's important to me. You know what was important to me having you at my high school graduation, or helping me move into my college dorm, or visiting me when I had my appendix out sophomore year. The past is the past, he said dismissively. This is about the future, our future as a family. We haven't been a family since I was 15. That can change, he insisted, but only if you're willing to make an effort too. After we hung up, I called Mom, who listened patiently as I vented. I won't tell you what to do, she said when I finished. You're an adult, and this is your relationship with your father. But I will say that whatever decision you make should be for your peace, not his. Over the next 2 weeks, Dad launched a campaign to ensure my attendance. He called daily, sent texts with updates about wedding plans, and even had Stephanie call me directly, a conversation that lasted all of 30 awkward seconds before I made an excuse to hang up. April, sweetie, I know our relationship has been complicated, Stephanie said in a voice that sounded rehearsed. But I've always thought of you as family, and it would mean so much to have your blessing on our special day. I nearly choked at her audacity. She had never once reached out to me in 12 years, and now she wanted my blessing. The pressure extended beyond Dad and Stephanie. My paternal grandmother called, gently suggesting that life was too short for grudges. Dad's brother, Uncle James, who had maintained a neutral stance during the divorce, emailed to say he hoped to see me at the wedding. Even my cousins, with whom I had once been close, started sending messages on social media talking about reuniting at the wedding. It felt like a coordinated effort to wear down my resistance. My friends were firmly in the don't go camp. He doesn't deserve your presence, Emily argued during our monthly dinner. He's trying to use you as a prop to show everyone what a great dad he is. Jasmine was more pragmatic. If you do go, set clear boundaries. Don't let them rope you into giving a toast or being part of the ceremony. Attend as a guest, nothing more. My therapist, whom I had continued seeing periodically, asked what I hoped to gain from attending or not attending. If you go, what's the best outcome you can envision? If you don't go, will you regret it later? There's no right answer here, just what feels right for you. As the RSVP deadline approached, Dad's tactics grew more manipulative. He mentioned that Mom's cousin Aunt Lisa, who had been a second mother to me growing up, had confirmed her attendance. She thinks it's time for healing, he claimed, though when I called Aunt Lisa to verify, she admitted she had declined the invitation out of loyalty to Mom. In a particularly low moment, Dad suggested that my refusal to attend was hurting my grandmother, who might not have many special occasions left due to her age, despite the fact that she was a healthy, active 72-year-old who had recently completed a half marathon. The most effective pressure, however, came from Dad's insistence that my absence would be conspicuous and gossiped about. People will wonder why my own daughter isn't at my wedding. Is that the narrative you want, for everyone to see our family divided? It was the word narrative that got to me. Dad had always been concerned with appearances, with how others perceived him. It made me wonder what story he had been telling people about our relationship, about the divorce, about Mom. After nearly a month of deliberation and constant pressure, I reluctantly RSVP'd yes, with conditions I would attend as a guest, only would not participate in the ceremony, and would leave immediately after dinner. Dad agreed readily, probably assuming he could change my mind once I was there. What he didn't know was that my decision wasn't about reconciliation or forgiveness. It was about curiosity, about understanding the man who had walked away from us so easily, and perhaps about finding closure. Or at least, that's what I told myself as I mailed the response card. I had no idea that my real motivation would reveal itself in the most unexpected way through a conversation that would change everything. 2 weeks before the wedding, I received a call from my Aunt Carrie, Dad's younger sister. Unlike the rest of his family, who had either taken his side or remained neutrally distant after the divorce, Carrie had maintained a relationship with both Mom and me. She had been the one to send birthday cards that actually arrived on time, the one who attended my college graduation when Dad didn't show, the one who never pressured me to forgive and forget. "I heard you're coming to the wedding," she said, her voice cautious. Reluctantly, I admitted. Dad was relentless. "Richard has always been good at getting his way," she said with a sigh. "Listen, are you free for dinner this weekend? I'd like to talk to you before the wedding." We met at a quiet restaurant near my apartment. Carrie looked nervous, fidgeting with her napkin, and ordering a glass of wine before we even looked at the menu. "There are things you should know," she said after our orders had been taken. "Things about your dad and Stephanie that I've kept to myself for too long." My heart began to race. "What things?" "The affair didn't start when you were 15, she said, her eyes sad. "It had been going on for about 5 years by then." 5 years. That would mean it started when I was around 10. I felt dizzy trying to process this. "How do you know this?" "I caught them together at a family cabin during a weekend when Richard claimed to be on a business trip. You were about 11 then. He begged me not to tell Jennifer, said it was just a physical thing, that he still loved your mom and would end it." The timeline struck me as odd. "But Stephanie worked at his company, right? That's how they met." Carrie looked uncomfortable. "That's the story he put out after the divorce, but no, Stephanie never worked for the pharmaceutical company." "Then how did they meet?" She took a large sip of wine. "She was your babysitter." The world seemed to tilt beneath me. "My babysitter? From when you were about 10 until 12. Remember when your mom started taking night shifts at the hospital? Richard hired Stephanie to stay with you. She was a graduate student at the time, needed the money." Memories flooded back, disjointed and suddenly sinister. A young woman with blonde hair helping me with homework at the kitchen table. Dad coming home early from work when she was there. Hushed conversations that stopped when I entered a room. "They were having an affair in our house while she was taking care of me." Carrie nodded miserably. "I confronted him again after a year when it was clear he hadn't ended it. He admitted they were in love, but claimed he stayed for you, that he didn't want to break up your home." "How noble of him," I said bitterly. "There's more," Carrie continued. "The reason I finally decided to tell you is that I found out something recently that made me sick. Stephanie has a son." "I know. Jacob. He's 9. Dad mentioned him a few times." Another painful reminder of the new family Dad had created. Jacob is almost 13 April. The implication hit me like a physical blow. 13, but that would mean... Stephanie was pregnant before your parents' divorce was finalized. In fact, I suspect Richard only finally left when he couldn't hide her pregnancy anymore. I struggled to breathe. "Does Mom know this?" "I don't think so. I only found out because Jacob mentioned his upcoming 13th birthday when I visited them last month. Richard saw my reaction and later tried to convince me the boy was born premature, and I had the dates wrong." The betrayal felt fresh, as though it had happened yesterday rather than 12 years ago. Not only had Dad been cheating for far longer than I knew with someone who had been in our home, but he had fathered a child with her while still married to Mom. "There's one more thing," Carrie said hesitantly. "About the financial side of things. Dad had always complained about money during the divorce, fighting Mom on every aspect of the settlement and child support." "What about it?" "Richard had been diverting money to set Stephanie up in an apartment for years before the divorce. Tens of thousands of dollars that should have been part of your family's finances. I thought of Mom working extra shifts to make ends meet after the divorce of my student loans because Dad claimed he couldn't contribute more to my education of Mom's current health issues exacerbated by years of stress and overwork." "How could he do this to us?" I whispered, tears streaming down my face. Carrie reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "My brother has always been selfish, but the extent of his deception shocked even me. I'm telling you this now because I see how he and Stephanie are trying to rewrite history, portraying themselves as star-crossed lovers who couldn't help falling in love, acting like their relationship began after the marriage was already over. It's not fair to you or your mom. I wiped my tears, anger replacing shock. No, it's not fair, and I'm done with their narrative. As Carrie drove me home, a plan began forming in my mind. Dad wanted me at his wedding as a prop in his perfect family picture. Fine. I would attend, but not in the way he expected. The next day I called Mom and asked if we could meet for lunch. Over sandwiches at her favorite cafe, I shared what Carrie had told me. Mom listened quietly, her expression shifting from surprise to pain to a resigned sort of vindication. I suspected the affair had been going on longer, she said when I finished. There were signs I ignored because I wanted to believe in our marriage. But I had no idea about Stephanie being your babysitter or about Jacob's age. Are you angry that Carrie never told you? Mom considered this. No. She was caught in a difficult position between loyalty to her brother and what she knew was right. I'm grateful she finally told you the truth. What should I do about the wedding? I asked, still conflicted despite my growing resolve. Mom's eyes, so like my own, met mine steadily. What do you want to do, April? Part of me wants to expose everything to make them face what they did to us. But another part just wants to walk away and never look back. Either choice is valid, Mom said. But ask yourself this 10 years from now. Which decision will you be at peace with? Her question stayed with me for days as I wrestled with what to do. I thought about the years of therapy, the trust issues that had affected every relationship I'd tried to build, Mom's health problems stemming from the financial and emotional stress of the divorce. I thought about Dad's smug assumption that I would fall in line with his wishes, that I would help him present the image of a happy reunited family at his wedding. And I thought about Stephanie, who had betrayed not only my mother, but me as well, entering our home under the guise of caring for me while carrying on an affair with my father. 3 days before the wedding, I made my final decision. I wasn't going to quietly attend and leave, nor was I going to skip the event entirely. I was going to attend, and I was going to tell the truth, consequences be damned. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and clear, a picture-perfect June day that seemed to mock my turbulent emotions. I dressed carefully in a navy blue dress, professional and understated. This wasn't a celebration for me, and I wouldn't pretend otherwise. As I applied my makeup, I rehearsed what I might say if given the opportunity. I wasn't planning to cause a scene during the ceremony itself. I wasn't that cruel. But if Dad tried to involve me more than agreed upon, I was prepared. The Grand Plaza Hotel was exactly the kind of ostentatious venue Dad would choose, with crystal chandeliers and marble floors that screamed expense. The contrast with the financial support he had provided to Mom and me over the years was not lost on me. This one day probably cost more than a year of my college tuition. I slipped into the ceremony just before it began, taking a seat in the back row. Dad, standing at the altar, spotted me and gave a wide smile, as though my presence was a personal victory for him. I nodded curtly in response. As Stephanie walked down the aisle in her designer gown, I found myself studying her, this woman who had been the catalyst for so much pain in my life. She looked happy, radiant, even showing no sign of guilt or discomfort at my presence. A boy in a junior groomsman's tuxedo stood near Dad Jacob, I presumed. Looking at him was like seeing a younger version of my father, the same jawline and eyes. My half-brother, who had been conceived while Dad was still married to Mom, who was nearly 13, not 9, as I had been led to believe. Another lie in a mountain of deceptions. The ceremony itself was mercifully brief, with vows that emphasized new beginnings and true love finding its way carefully crafted narratives that sidestepped the infidelity at the foundation of their relationship. I sat stone-faced throughout, not joining in the happy tears and applause that surrounded me. At the reception, I was seated at the family table, a prominent position that made my attendance visible to all guests. Dad made his way over during the cocktail hour, putting his arm around me for the benefit of watching relatives. "I'm so glad you came, April," he said, his smile never reaching his eyes. "It means everything to have you here." "Does it?" I asked coolly. His smile faltered slightly. "Of course it does. You're my daughter." "When it's convenient," I muttered. Before he could respond, Stephanie joined us, champagne glass in hand. "April, thank you for coming. I know this hasn't been easy for you." Her practiced sincerity made my skin crawl. "Let's not pretend," I said quietly. "We both know why I'm here." Dad laughed nervously, tightening his grip on my shoulder. "April has always had a dry sense of humor." Stephanie's smile remained fixed as she changed the subject. "We've actually been discussing the idea of you saying a few words during dinner. As Richard's daughter, it would mean so much." "That wasn't our agreement," I said, alarm bells ringing in my head. "I know, but it's such a special day," Dad pressed. "Just a short toast, nothing elaborate." I looked at them, these two people who had caused so much damage while rewriting history to cast themselves as the heroes of their own love story. Something in me snapped. "Fine," I said, surprising even myself. "I'll say a few words." Dad looked delighted, clearly assuming I had finally come around. If only he knew what was coming. Throughout dinner, I sat quietly observing the elaborate charade around me. Dad worked the room like a politician, presenting himself as the devoted father and now husband. Several guests approached me with comments like, "Your father talks about you constantly," and "Richard is so proud of you." Statements so demonstrably false, they would have been laughable if they weren't so infuriating. When the time came for speeches, the best man and maid of honor went first, sharing sanitized stories of Dad and Stephanie's relationship that carefully omitted its adulterous beginnings. Then Dad stood clinking his glass for attention. "And now, I'm especially proud to have my daughter April say a few words." A spotlight found me as I rose from my seat, my heart pounding, but my resolve firm. I took the microphone and surveyed the room full of expectant faces. For those who don't know me, I'm April Richards' daughter from his first marriage. I paused, gathering my thoughts. When my father asked me to attend his wedding, I was hesitant. We haven't been close since he left my mother and me 12 years ago. A murmur ran through the crowd. Dad's smile became strained. But I realized this was an opportunity for truth, something that's been in short supply regarding the story of Richard and Stephanie's relationship. Dad started moving toward me, but I continued, my voice growing stronger. "Many of you have been told that my father and Stephanie met at work and fell in love after his marriage was already failing. The truth is, their affair began when I was 10 years old, when Stephanie was hired as my babysitter." Gasps rippled through the audience. Stephanie's face drained of color. Their affair continued for 5 years before my mother discovered it. During that time, my father was diverting family funds to set Stephanie up in an apartment, money that should have gone toward my college fund or my mother's retirement. Dad reached me now, attempting to take the microphone. I stepped away, determined to finish. "And Jacob, the son they've told everyone is 9 years old, is actually turning 13 soon, conceived while my father was still married to my mother." The room erupted in shocked whispers. Dad grabbed my arm, his face contorted with anger. "That's enough, April," he hissed. "No, Dad, it's not nearly enough," I replied loud enough for those nearby to hear. "For 12 years, I've watched you rewrite history, portray yourself as a devoted father who simply fell in love with someone new. You've never taken responsibility for the pain you caused for the family you destroyed, for abandoning Mom when her health began failing from the stress of raising me alone while working full-time. Dad's grip tightened painfully on my arm. "You're making a scene," he growled. "Yes, I am." I agreed, pulling free. "Because I'm done with your lies. I'm done pretending for the sake of your comfort. I came here today not to celebrate your wedding, but to finally speak the truth you've been hiding for years." I turned back to the stunned guests. "I wish I could say I'm sorry for disrupting this happy occasion, but I'm only sorry it took me this long to stand up for my mother and myself. Congratulations on your wedding. May your marriage be more honest than the relationship that preceded it." With that, I placed the microphone on the nearest table and walked out, head held high, despite the chaos erupting behind me. As I reached the door, I heard Stephanie's tearful voice, attempting damage control, claiming I was troubled and still dealing with the divorce. But I also noticed several guests slipping out behind me, including some of Dad's older relatives who had known Mom well. Aunt Carrie caught up to me in the lobby, squeezing my hand wordlessly before returning inside, presumably to witness the fallout. In the quiet of my car, parked far from the hotel entrance, I finally let myself cry, not from sadness, but from release. For the first time in 12 years, I had spoken my truth, refusing to be complicit in Dad's carefully constructed narrative. As I drove away from the Grand Plaza, I felt lighter than I had in years. The weight of unspoken words and suppressed anger finally lifted from my shoulders. Whatever came next, I had reclaimed my voice and my story. The immediate aftermath of the wedding was exactly what you might expect: a flurry of angry calls and texts from Dad, alternating between rage and manipulation. "How could you humiliate us like that?" he demanded, and his first voicemail left while I was still driving home from the venue. "Do you have any idea the damage you've caused Stephanie is inconsolable?" His second message, left an hour later, took a different approach. "April, I understand you're hurt, but there were better ways to address your feelings. We could have talked privately. Please call me back so we can fix this." By the next morning, his tactics shifted to guilt. "Your grandmother is devastated by your behavior." "Is that what you wanted? To hurt an elderly woman who loves you?" I let the messages accumulate without response, needing time to process my own feelings about what had transpired. While I didn't regret speaking the truth, the confrontation had drained me emotionally, leaving me with a complex mix of liberation and exhaustion. What I hadn't anticipated was the wave of messages from other wedding guests. Dad's cousin Michael, who had always been kind to Mom, sent a brief text. "I had no idea. I'm sorry for how I've distanced myself from you and Jennifer." An old family friend, Ruth, who had been at my parents' wedding, called to tell me she had left immediately after my speech, unable to celebrate a union built on such deception. Most surprising was a text from Stephanie's sister, Caroline. "I always felt something was off about their timeline. For what it's worth, I believe you." These messages confirmed what I had suspected, that Dad and Stephanie had constructed an elaborate fiction about their relationship, one that painted them in a more flattering light and absolved them of responsibility for the pain they had caused. 3 days after the wedding, I finally called Dad back, prepared for another confrontation. "I've been thinking about what you said at the wedding," he began, his voice surprisingly subdued. "And," I prompted when he fell silent. "Some of it was unfair," he continued. "The implication that I abandoned you completely, that I haven't tried to maintain a relationship." "Dad, your version of maintaining a relationship was occasional phone calls and gifts when you remembered. You missed every significant event in my life after the divorce." "That's not entirely true," he protested weakly. "Name one important event you attended," I challenged. "One parents' weekend, one graduation, one award ceremony." His silence was answer enough. Did you call me to dispute my version of events? Or is there something else? I asked, feeling suddenly tired of the whole conversation. I want to understand why now, he said finally. After all these years, why choose my wedding day to air all this? The question caught me off guard because it seemed so obvious. Because you were using me as a prop in your perfect family narrative. Because you and Stephanie have spent 12 years rewriting history to make yourselves the heroes of your love story, rather than acknowledging the destruction you caused. Because you've never once in all these years truly apologized for what you did to Mom and me. I've apologized multiple times, he countered. You've said you're sorry things worked out the way they did. That's not the same as taking responsibility for your choices. Another long silence followed. What do you want from me, April? The question was so genuine, it momentarily disarmed me. What did I want from him? After a moment of reflection, I found clarity. I want you to stop lying to yourself and to others. I want you to acknowledge what really happened, not the sanitized version you've been telling for years. I want you to understand that your choices had consequences, ones that Mom and I have been living with while you started over with your new family. And if I do all that, he asked, what then? Then maybe we can start building something real. Not a father-daughter relationship like we should have had all along. That opportunity is gone. But maybe something honest between two adults who share some history and DNA. I'll think about what you've said, he replied, neither committing to nor rejecting my terms. We ended the call soon after having reached an uneasy truce rather than a resolution. I didn't expect dramatic changes, but for the first time, I felt I had been truly heard. In the weeks that followed, I reconnected with several family members who had reached out after the wedding. Aunt Carrie and I began meeting regularly for lunch, our relationship strengthening now that the secrets between us were gone. She shared stories of my father as a child, helping me understand the man he was before he became the father who disappointed me so thoroughly. More surprising was the tentative connection that developed with Jacob, my half-brother. He sent me a friend request on social media, followed by a cautious message. I know things are weird with our dad, but I've always wanted to get to know my sister. Despite my complicated feelings about his existence, I recognized that Jacob was innocent in all this just as I had been. We began exchanging messages, careful at first, then gradually more open. He was a thoughtful kid, intelligent and perceptive, aware that something significant had happened at the wedding, but shielded from the details by Dad and Stephanie. As for Mom, she listened to my account of the wedding with a mix of shock and pride. I never would have had the courage to do that, she admitted. But I'm glad you found your voice. Her health had been improving steadily since reducing her work hours and focusing on stress management. Watching her regain her energy and joy reinforced my belief that speaking the truth had been necessary not just for me, but for her as well. My therapy sessions took on new significance as I processed the wedding confrontation and its aftermath. Sarah helped me understand that while the explosion of truth had been cathartic, true healing would come through the quieter work of setting boundaries and building a life defined by my choices rather than my father's actions. Revenge feels satisfying in the moment, she observed, but it doesn't necessarily bring closure or peace. Those come from within, from accepting what happened and choosing how to move forward. Her words resonated with me. The wedding confrontation hadn't magically healed 12 years of hurt, but it had cleared the air of lies, creating space for something more authentic to potentially grow. 6 months after the wedding, an unexpected opportunity arose at work, a promotion that would require relocating to Chicago. The position offered better pay, more responsibility, and a fresh start in a new city. After careful consideration, I accepted, seeing it as a chance to define myself on my own terms, away from the shadow of family history. When I told Dad about my move during one of our now monthly phone calls, His response surprised me. "I'm proud of you, April. You've built a good career despite everything." It was perhaps the most genuine thing he had said to me in years. Moving meant leaving Mom, which was difficult, but she encouraged me enthusiastically. "I didn't raise you to stay close for my sake," she insisted. "Go build your life." We established a routine of weekly video calls and monthly visits, maintaining our close bond across the distance. With her improved health and a new part-time schedule that allowed for more rest, she even began dating again, something that gave me immense joy to witness. In Chicago, I slowly began opening myself to new relationships. I met Ethan, an architectural engineer, at a mutual friend's dinner party. Unlike previous relationships where I had kept parts of myself hidden, afraid of rejection, I was open about my complicated family history and trust issues from the beginning. Rather than being scared away, Ethan appreciated my honesty and demonstrated his trustworthiness through consistent actions rather than empty words, a refreshing change from what I had known. As for Dad and Stephanie, our relationship remained complex. The explosive truth-telling at their wedding had cleared away the pretense, but building something new on the cleared ground was slow work. Dad made more consistent efforts to maintain contact, and while I remained cautious, I allowed myself to engage when it felt right, withdrawing when old patterns emerged. I declined their first invitation to holiday dinner, not yet ready for that level of family togetherness, but agreed to meet Dad alone for lunch when he visited Chicago on business. These small steps felt manageable, a way to test the waters of a potential new relationship without compromising my boundaries or well-being. Looking back on the journey from that devastated 15-year-old girl to the woman I am now, I recognize that healing hasn't followed a linear path. There have been setbacks and breakthroughs, moments of clarity, and periods of confusion. What changed at the wedding wasn't just that I spoke my truth, but that I reclaimed my power to define my own narrative, to decide what role my father's actions would play in my ongoing story. The truth didn't set everything right, but it created an opening for authenticity to enter relationships that had been built on deception. It allowed me to stop carrying the weight of other people's lies and to start building connections based on who we really are, rather than who we pretend to be. If you're watching this and dealing with family betrayal or trying to heal from parental abandonment, I want you to know that your timeline for healing is your own. There's no expiration date on pain, no point at which you're required to forgive and forget. But there is tremendous power in speaking your truth and refusing to participate in narratives that minimize your experience or erase your pain. For me, true freedom came not from revenge, but from reclaiming my voice and using it to define my own story. It came from recognizing that while I couldn't change my father's choices, I could make my own choices based on truth rather than fear or obligation. Have you ever had to stand up for your truth against family pressure? How did it change your relationship? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more real-life stories about finding strength through difficult family situations. Thank you for listening to my journey from silence to truth. And remember, sometimes the most healing thing we can do is simply to stop pretending.